Mason Cole had survived 3 tours overseas, 2 gunshot wounds, and a helicopter crash that should have killed him. But it was a simple hiking accident on his own property, a torn ligament and a shattered ankle, that finally forced him into a bed he couldn't leave. The cabin, once his sanctuary of pine walls and quiet mornings, now felt like a cage. Sunlight cut through the tall windows and fell across his bandaged leg as he shifted against the pillows, jaw tight with frustration. He was a man used to moving, used to controlling every room he walked into. Now he could barely control his own body. The paramedics had come and gone twice that week, checking on the wound, adjusting the dressing, murmuring reassurances he didn't need. But today felt different the moment the front door opened. Boots on hardwood. Voices low and clipped, not casual. He watched from the bed as a small group entered his bedroom. A paramedic with a stethoscope slung around his neck, a young medic carrying a defibrillator case, a ranger holding a cardboard box he hadn't ordered, and trailing behind them, unhurried, a woman in navy scrubs. She introduced herself simply. Elena, his night nurse, sent to monitor his recovery while the swelling went down and the antibiotics did their work. She had pale blonde hair pulled back into a tight knot, sharp blue eyes that swept the room once before settling on him, and hands that moved with a precision that seemed almost rehearsed. Mason had met 100 nurses in his life. None of them entered a room like they were clearing it first. He didn't say anything about it. Not yet. He watched her check his vitals, her fingers cool and steady against his wrist, counting his pulse in silence while the others hovered near the doorway, oddly stiff, oddly quiet for a routine home visit. It was the kind of tension Mason recognized from briefings before a mission, not from a Tuesday afternoon medical check-in. He filed it away the way he filed away everything that didn't sit right. Quietly, patiently, waiting for the pattern to reveal itself. That was when Duke growled. Duke was not an ordinary dog. He was a retired military working dog. A Belgian Malinois who had pulled Mason out of a collapsed building 2 years earlier, and never left his side since. Scarred along one flank, missing part of an ear, Duke had seen more combat than most soldiers twice his age, and he did not growl without reason. He came around the foot of the bed slowly, hackles raised, teeth bared at the newcomers crowding the doorway, a low warning rumbling from his chest that made the ranger take a step back and nearly drop the box in his arms. Mason sat up despite the pain screaming through his ankle. Duke! Easy! The dog ignored him. His focus was locked entirely on Elena, muscles coiled, ready to lunge. Then Elena did something that made the room go still. She raised her hand, not toward Duke's face, not in any gesture Mason had ever taught the animal, but low and precise near her hip, 2 fingers extended, wrist angled just so. It was subtle. It was fast. If Mason hadn't spent a decade training and fighting alongside dogs exactly like Duke, he would have missed it entirely. Duke stopped mid-growl. His ears flattened, not in submission but in recognition. He sat, immediate and disciplined, the way he'd been trained to sit only for handlers who had earned that response through years of controlled conditioning, not through a few days of casual visits. Mason had seen that exact signal before on deployment, given by operators who didn't speak the same language as their K-9 units, but shared the same silent code drilled into every working dog on the field. It wasn't a nurse's gesture. It wasn't civilian at all. Where did you learn that? Mason said, his voice low, no longer the voice of a patient making small talk. Elena didn't flinch. She lowered her hand slowly, met his eyes, and for the briefest moment something flickered behind her calm expression, something that looked almost like relief that he'd noticed. I didn't think you'd remember, she said quietly. It's been a long time since Fallujah. The room seemed to shrink. The paramedic by the door shifted his weight, and Mason caught the faint outline of something beneath his scrub top that had nothing to do with medical equipment. The ranger's cardboard box sat a little too heavy in his arms for supplies. None of them were who they claimed to be, and Duke, trained better than any human in that room to detect a threat, had known it from the second they walked in. He simply hadn't expected the threat to be standing directly beside him, dressed as his rescuer. Mason's hand drifted toward the nightstand, toward the pistol he kept there out of habit more than paranoia. But Elena's eyes flicked to the motion and she shook her head, almost imperceptibly. Not yet, she murmured. Not until I know which one of them followed me here. Outside, past the tall windows and the red arrow silence of the pines, an engine idled on the gravel road that led to the cabin. Nobody in the room moved. Duke's ears rotated toward the sound, and a low growl started again, this time not at Elena but past her toward the door. Whatever Elena Voss really was, she hadn't come to Mason's cabin by accident, and the people standing behind her in scrubs and uniforms were not the team the clinic had sent. Something had followed her here, and it was arriving now. Elena's real name was not Elena Voss, though she'd carried that identity so long it barely felt like a lie anymore. 6 years earlier, in a dust-choked compound outside Fallujah, she had been a field medic attached to a joint special operations unit. The only woman on a 12-man team, trusted enough to be handed the K-9 handler's silent signal book on her second week in theater. Mason Cole had been the team's lead breacher back then. The man who kicked indoors while she patched up whoever came out bleeding on the other side. They'd worked 3 deployments together before the unit was quietly dissolved, its records sealed, its members scattered under new names for reasons none of them were ever fully told. She recognized him the second she'd been assigned his case, the scar above his eyebrow, the way he held perfectly still to hide pain, the way his eyes tracked every exit in a room even half-drugged on painkillers. She'd taken the assignment on purpose. Someone was hunting the surviving members of their old unit, one by one, disguising the kills as accidents, and Mason's hiking accident had not looked like an accident to the people who'd sent her. "They're cleaning house," she said now, voice tight, as the engine outside cut off and car doors opened. "2 others from our unit are already dead. I came to warn you before they found you first. I didn't expect they'd already be inside your home wearing scrubs." The paramedic by the door dropped the pretense entirely, his hand moving fast toward his hip, but Duke was faster. A blur of scarred muscle and fury launching across the room on a command. Elena barked in a language that wasn't English and wasn't meant to be understood by anyone but a dog trained to obey it. The man went down hard, and in the chaos, Mason swung off the bed onto his one good leg, grabbing the pistol from the nightstand with the same instinct that had kept him alive through 3 wars. The ranger dropped his box and reached for something inside his jacket, and Elena was already moving, closing the distance in 2 steps, disarming him with the brutal efficiency of someone who had trained for exactly this and nothing else for years. The young medic bolted for the hallway, and Mason balanced awkwardly against the bed frame, fired once, low, deliberately non-lethal, catching the man in the leg before he reached the door. It was over in under 30 seconds, the kind of violence that only made sense to people who'd lived through it before. When the smoke cleared, Duke stood guard over the downed paramedic, teeth bared, refusing to let him move, while Elena knelt beside Mason, checking the ankle he'd just torn open again in the scramble. "You're an idiot," she said, though her hands were gentle as she retied the dressing. "You could have torn the whole thing open. You could have led with, 'I'm actually a covert operative here to save your life.'" Mason shot back, breathing hard, adrenaline finally catching up to him. "Instead of just standing there waving at my dog. Would you have believed me?" He looked at Duke, still holding position over their attacker with the same discipline he'd shown on every extraction Mason had ever pulled him through, and he laughed despite the pain, despite everything. "No," he admitted. "But I believed him." Outside, more vehicles were approaching, headlights sweeping through the trees, and Elena's expression hardened again, the brief warmth gone as fast as it had come. Whoever was cleaning house on their old unit wasn't finished, and now Mason Cole was wide awake to the danger circling his own front porch. Elena helped him to his feet, slung his arm over her shoulder, and looked toward Duke, who fell into step beside them without needing a word, trained instincts and old loyalty aligning perfectly in the dim cabin light. "We need to move," she said. "Now. And Mason, this time trust the signal. Whatever you see me do next, whatever it looks like, trust it." He nodded once, gripping the pistol tighter, and for the first time since the accident, he didn't feel like a broken man trapped in a bed. He felt like a soldier again, standing beside the only 2 allies in the world who had never once needed words to know exactly what he needed. As they moved toward the back door with the headlights closing in, one truth settled over him with absolute certainty. Whoever had sent people to finish what Fallujah started had no idea what was about to hit them. If this story pulled you in, the next chapter goes even deeper into who's hunting them and why, and you won't want to miss it. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you're the first to know when Chapter 3 drops, because this fight is only just beginning.